Jim, if I can just start with you in Salford, what does no deal mean for you for the sandwich industry?
I don't think it means absolutely no sandwiches, because our industry is very creative and clever at coming up with new recipes. But certainly there would be serious problems in terms of some of the fresh ingredients we bring in from the European Union and also from overseas, particularly if we have problems at the ports and we can't get ingredients through. Because they're all fresh and don't have a very long shelf life, and we've got no chance of stockpiling fresh ingredients. So I think the answer from the sandwich industry is going to be that it's going to limit the amount of choice that consumers have if we suddenly crash out of Brexit in the way that's being talked about.
Are you saying no fresh sandwiches then?
There will be a certain amount of fresh sandwiches. I think our food industry in the UK isn't self-sufficient, so we can't produce everything here that we need. Our industry, like many parts of the food industry, has to go abroad to buy ingredients, particularly because consumers like to have out of season have lettuce and tomatoes and things that perhaps can't be grown here in the volumes we need.
Let me just try and get a sense of you. What would be in those sandwiches then? What do the sandwiches look like to you after a no-deal Brexit, bluntly?
There are probably going to be shortages of ingredients, particularly like tomatoes, which we buy in quite a lot from Spain and Europe generally, lettuce, and at certain times of the year. I think there are also going to be products like avocados that are difficult to come by if we've got difficulties at the ports and things.
So why can't we just buy British? I mean, you could imagine or envisage the sandwich which is just a purely British sandwich, right?
It's a nice idea, but unfortunately the industry isn't geared up for that at the moment, and it would take a fair amount of time for us to do that, to replace the sources we have around the world. And we live in a world that is global. It's not no longer just isolated to our shores. So I think realistically any sort of crash out of Europe and sudden changes are going to cause problems. And we're already seeing the lack of confidence in people working in the UK from Europe and shortages of people in a lot of our industry. If you walk down any high street at the moment, you'll see signs up for people, recruitment signs.
Jim,
that is a symptom of it.
Thank you very much indeed. Marcus Fish, you're going to tell the director of the British Salmon Association he's just deploying Project Fear.
Well, I think silly season has obviously started a bit early this year.
Why is that silly?
There's no suggestion whatsoever that imports from the EU will be limited by our new trade arrangements.
Right,
that's just a complete
So you don't believe anything he's saying about the warning signals that are coming out?
No, I don't believe that there would be a blockade of imports from the EU. That really is truly ludicrous.
In a no-deal situation, there is no trade arrangement. That's exactly what he's talking about. That's the scenario he's just drawn.
That doesn't mean that we don't let anything into the country. That's just
It's not about letting things in. It's about not knowing where you get things from and what's stored.
Leaders of this country who will respect the referendum result and get on with the business of actually planning and making arrangements.
What on earth does that mean? Respecting the referendum result is a platitude. What you've just heard is a man who works in the food industry who says he envisages it will be more difficult to get fresh food if there is no deal. Well, why don't you believe that?
Because it's completely wrong. It's completely false. It's a completely false assumption. There is not going to be a trade blockade of Europe
Jim, I'll let you come back on
by the UK after Brexit.
Briefly, Jim, I'll let you come back on that.
I think the issue is what the border controls are like, and we've had problems in the past with border controls, and our whole industry, and not just the whole food industry, is geared up to very swift movement of goods in and out of the UK. If we suddenly have border controls being introduced that aren't there now, that's going to cause some massive problems with the fresh ingredients. We live in a just-in-time world. We don't stockpile ingredients.
Let me bring in Jonathan. Are you happy to see us talking about these sorts of preparations now? And by that, obviously, I mean the government being more frank about the no-deal preparations.
I think it's really important we do, but let's just face up to the fact that 40% of our fruit and veg comes from the EU. So if we are in a no-deal scenario where we don't have a tariff agreement, we're on WTO, which is 50% extra, for instance, on milk. If we're in a situation where we can't get the lorries across because 2 minutes extra checking creates a 17-mile backlog, if we're in a situation where companies are having to file a lot more paperwork, this is going to create a very serious situation, whichever way you look at it. So I think it really is important that we do look at the no-deal scenario. But I also think it's important to realise that the Project Fear accusation that's been put out today, I think that's impractical. I think the real reason why we've had the delay, and there has been a delay, and it's been...
So you think the government's changed its mind?
I think the government should have been putting out this stuff earlier, and I think the reason why they didn't, and I'd agree with Marcus, the reason why they didn't was because they didn't have a position on the white paper. And,
Okay.
and I don't think they wanted to upset people with no-deal scenario stuff until they had a government policy.
So if I'm
position.
frank, Marcus, I don't get your position entirely, because either you think that it is right, as you said, you agree that they should have put this stuff out earlier, or else you think they're putting it out and it's all Project Fear.
They need to plan well and to make the right arrangements and to be very clear with business and with individuals what is going to happen. There is absolutely no suggestion that we will impose tariffs on our imports from the EU. There's no reason that it needs to be like that.
There's no deal. There's no transition. There's no agreement.
Britain
it's
needs
not about
Brexit first and foremost in order to have the great democratic future that it
I
deserves.
don't know what that means. You're
Because
having Brexit spelt out to you by somebody who actually works in the food
there are
industry, who's
different
telling
types
you
of
about
Brexit,
border controls and the problems.
We do not need to impose a blockade on EU trade. That's just ridiculous.
You've said that before, and it comes back to
It's just
border
totally
controls.
wrong.
But it's not about imposing a blockade. Do you not understand that?
Yes, it is. It is. That's our choice. What tariffs we use, what our border controls are, that is up to us.
Is that down to us?
I think there are two important points here. Firstly, we've got to realise that neither, a hard Brexit is not the government's position. They have an established position. There are ministers going around Europe as we speak trying to defend that position. This is a position that the Prime Minister, frankly, had to sweat over the last few months to get it. It's not, for instance, everything that I would like to see, and I'm sure it's not everything that Marcus would like to see, but it is the established position. And that's,
but Marcus's point is there could still be a reciprocal deal with Europe, and even if you crash out, they'll meet us halfway.
If we come back in September, October, and the white paper, for whatever reason, the Chequers Agreement, for whatever reason, has been knocked out, then we go into the scenario of, is it better to have no deal or a bad deal? And we've got to start talking about what a bad deal is. And from my point of view, a hard Brexit WTO would be the worst deal of all.
Do you want people to talk about it because you want the British public to start to change their mind?
I want people to face up to the options. And the options, as far as I'm concerned, coming out of a WTO hard deal is not going to be a happy one.
So Number 10 has briefed that they want to scare people witless. That is irresponsible, scaremongering nonsense, and it should stop right now. And they should get behind Brexit, which people voted for.
Gentlemen, thank you very much.